but they help, they sure help to locate this or that. In the Reader's Edition, we are on page 410. The woodcut for the seventh commandment. I forget the woodcutter's name. What was his name?
Dern?
Huh?
Dern? No.
Dern, yeah.
Was it?
Dern something. Anyway, shows Achan, the thief, from Joshua 7, where the Israelites were conquering the lands and taking bounty. It was supposed to be for common pot, but Achan pocketed some of it. So it's appropriate, of course, for the seventh commandment, you shall not steal. What does this mean? The new version of the Small Catechism says we should fear and love God so that we may not take our neighbor's money or property, nor get them with bad products or deals, but help him to improve and protect his property and business. Which is sort of like the ones we memorized, the explanation. But it brings to mind with this different wording, bad products, deals. You guys who are good with words, you shall not finagle, rip off. How many euphemisms?
Dis.
Whatever, there's tons of words for stealing. So this is the seventh commandment. It's the fourth one of the second table, those dealing with our relationships to one another. You remember the ordering here, the priority, the fourth commandment, the parental office is above all offices except for God's. And the commandment commands the fourth commandment, honor toward the office that orders everything else, the home. The fifth commandment, fourth, the home. The fifth, with an individual person within that home, you shall not murder. Harm not, but do good to another. The sixth commandment, not individual protection, but couple protection, marriage. We should seek marriage, it should be protected, and for the sake of children, it needs to be sought and protected. And now we come to the seventh. God also wants property protected. And like I've said before, communism doesn't like this idea of owning property, owning things. They would want to own it and save you the bother of having your own stuff. I'm being facetious. After the commandment about you personally, and then your spouse, next comes the commandment about temporal property. God also wants property protected. He has commanded that no one shall take away from or diminish his neighbor's possessions. For to steal is nothing else than to get possession of another's property wrongfully. Briefly, this includes all kinds of advantage in all sorts of trade to the disadvantage of our neighbor. Now, this is indeed quite a widespread and common vice, but it is so little considered and noticed that it surpasses all measure. And so if all thieves who did not want to be known as thieves were to be hanged on gallows, the world would soon be devastated. There would be a lack both of executioners and gallows. For as we have just said, to steal means not only emptying our neighbor's money box and pockets, it also means grasping property in the market, in all stores, booths, wine and beer cellars, workshops, and in short, wherever there is trading or taking and giving of money for merchandise or labor. all kinds of advantage, all sorts of trade to the disadvantage of our neighbor. And that's why I began with all these different names for stealing. There's theft, there's fraud, there's embezzlement. We have a U.S. code as tall as a flower pot to keep up with all the different kinds of stealing. Let me explain this somewhat plainly for the common people, that it may be seen how godly we are. For example, consider a manservant or maidservant who does not serve faithfully in the house, does damage, or allows damage to be done when it could be prevented. He ruins and neglects the goods entrusted to him by laziness, idleness, or hate, to the spite and sorrow of master and mistress. In whatever way this can be done purposely, I'm not talking about what happens by mistake and against one's will, you can, in a year, steal 30 or 40 florins. If another servant had taken that much money secretly or carried it away, he would be hanged with the rope. But here you, while conscious of such a great theft, may even express defiance and become rude, and no one dare call you a thief. Luther says, I'm not talking about what happens by mistake. You know, sometimes you're distracted in work and you cut too much wire, or in the wrong place, or you inadvertently mess up a product, or you're new at the job, you can't keep up. That's not what this commandment deals with. I'm not talking about what happens by mistake or against one's will. You know, traffic is bad and you just can't punch in at the right time. It's not that you are lazy or whatever, it's just the way it happened. Or you're dependent on the proficiency of others who are higher or lower on the production line. I mean, you would be doing work if you had the work to do, but you don't. So, well, he's not dealing with that. But with those who underhandedly especially take, and who may even express defiance and become rude. You might have heard a while back, in some law enforcement jurisdictions don't even want to be called for shoplifting unless it exceeds $500 or $1,000. So a person can take from the shelf and walk out right underneath the cashier's nose in some places. And that's defiance. I say the same also about mechanics, workmen, and day laborers. They all follow their evil thoughts and never know enough ways to overcharge people, while they are lazy and unfaithful in their work. All these are far worse than burglars, whom we can guard against with locks and bolts, and if caught, can be treated in such a way that they will not commit the crime again. But against unfaithful workers, no one can guard. No one even dares to give them an angry look or accuse them of theft. One would rather lose 10 times as much money from his purse. For here are my neighbors, good friends, my own servants, from whom I expect every faithful and diligent service, yet they cheat me most of all. Furthermore, in the market and in common trade also, this practice is in full swing and force to the greatest extent. There one openly cheats another with bad merchandise, false measures, weights, and coins. By the way, that rough edge that coins had was so that you could see if someone shaved off some of the metal on the coin. False measures, weights, and coins, and by nimbleness and strange finances, cooking the book. Or he takes advantage of him with clever tricks. Likewise, one overcharges another in a trade and greedily drives a hard bargain, skins and distresses him. Who can repeat or think of all these acts? To sum up, this is the most common trade and the largest union on earth. If we consider the world through all conditions of life, it is nothing but a vast, wide sales booth full of great thieves. Boy, Luther's pretty optimistic.
Pretty hard on us.
The most common trade and the largest union on earth. The this means those more intent on profit than honesty and duty. Therefore, some are also called swivel chair robbers, land and highway robbers, not picklocks and burglars. For they snatch away easy money, but they sit on a chair at home and are styled great noblemen and honorable pious citizens. They rob and steal in a way assumed to be good. Yes, here we might be silent about the petty individual thieves, if we were to attack the great powerful arch-thieves with whom lords and princes keep company. These thieves daily plunder not only a city or two, but all of Germany. Indeed, where should we place the head and supreme protector of all thieves? The holy chair at Rome with all its train of attendants, which has grabbed by theft the wealth of all the world and holds it to this day. Of course, the holy chair at Rome is the papal office, who extort by threat. Sin demands penance, a repayment, often by alms. Or extortion by false promise. Your loved one will be released from purgatory. Or if you give money. Or renouncing worldly possessions and giving the profit to the church. That will be a high spiritual act, and you'll get extra grace for it. So Luther attacks the pretension, the pretending, the hypocrisy of those who really don't have regard for another's welfare, but only their own, and who enjoy the trust of people, but do not give full return on that trust. This is, in short, the way of the world. Whoever can steal and rob openly goes free and secure, unmolested by anyone, and even demands that he be honored. Meanwhile, the little burglars, who have once trespassed, must bear the shame and punishment to make the former thieves appear godly and honorable. But let such open thieves, that is, those that do things not by breaking in and not by busting a lock, but underhandedly by pretension and hypocrisy and false dealing, let each such open thieves know that in God's sight they are the greatest thieves. He will punish them as they are worthy and deserve. Now, since this commandment is so far-reaching, as just indicated, it is necessary to teach it well and to explain it to the common people. Do not let them go on in their greed and security, but always place before their eyes God's wrath and instill the same. For we must preach this not to Christians, but chiefly to hoods and scoundrels. It would be more fitting for judges, jailers, or Master Hans, the executioner, to preach to them. Therefore, let everyone know his duty at the risk of God's displeasure. He must do no harm to his neighbor, nor deprive him of profit, nor commit any act of unfaithfulness or hatred in any bargain or trade. But he must also faithfully preserve his property for him, secure and promote his advantage. This is especially true when one accepts money, wages, and one's livelihood for such service. You're taking money to do a job and therefore do it the way it should be. Now, the person who greedily despises this commandment may indeed pass by and escape the hangman. But he shall not escape God's wrath and punishment. When he has long practiced his defiance and arrogance, he shall still remain a tramp and beggar. In addition, he will have all plagues and misfortune. Now you are going your own way, though you ought to preserve the property of your master and mistress. For your service you fill your throat and stomach. You take your wages like a thief, and have people treat you like a nobleman. For there are many that are even rude towards their masters and mistresses, and are unwilling to do them a favor or service by which to protect them from loss. Luther brings out the two aspects of the commandment: do not take by any act of unfaithfulness, but give, that is, faithfully preserve, promote, improve our neighbors or our boss's advantage. And he says what experience teaches, that crime doesn't pay. Or as he said, he will say, crime does pay, but not the way we want or expect. Paragraph 236. But consider what you will gain. When you have come into your own property and are set up in your home, to which God will help with all misfortunes, your earlier misdeeds will bob up again and come home to you. You will find that where you have cheated or done injury at the value of 1 mite, you will have to pay 30 again. Ill-gained goods not only are not pleasing, satisfying. You know, you're always going to be looking over your shoulder and trying to cover your tracks. Ill-gained goods also aren't taken care of like you would that which was earned honestly. And so that's a waste also. And what Luther says is important for us to realize, that God doesn't just exist and work in the spiritual realm. Give us this day is a statement of faith, that we know God works daily and with physical, bodily gifts or withholding of gifts. He will not bless a bad attitude, a bad attendance, bad work habits, but he will bless those with good. So he talks here about the person that lived by unlawful gain, and now he finds that he has to put up with unlawfulness himself, and that 1 mite that he earned wrongly will not benefit him. He'll have to pay it 30 times over again. This will also be the result for mechanics and day laborers. We are now obliged to hear and suffer such intolerable hatred from them, as though they were noblemen in another's possessions, and everyone is obliged to give them what they demand. Just let them continue making their demands as long as they can. God will not forget his commandment. He will reward them just as they have served. He will hang them not upon a green gallows, but upon a dry one. So all their life they shall neither prosper nor gather anything. Indeed, if there were a well-ordered government in the land, such greediness might soon be checked and prevented. That was the custom in ancient times among the Romans. There, such characters were promptly seized by the head in a way that caused others to take warning. And Luther here introduces the legitimate oversight, the check and balance of government, who are ideally arbitrators of what is right and just, and protect widows and orphans, and the poor, and the worker. And in fact, as we read in Abram's life, he had to form a government of sorts. When the marauding eastern kings came to take over Canaan and that vicinity, and they took Lot and people and the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah, Abram had to stand up as a government of sorts and form his servants into an army, and they were a counterforce against evil. So there are protections that God sets up. But the commandment is to cut all this advantage taking off in the individual, first of all, so that the jails need not be full. Well, we are going to stop there. We have another about the same amount to cover again next time. Questions or comments? This is a tough look here, and of course the law accuses us too. I've certainly been guilty of breaking this commandment. Well, the Lord be with you.
And also
Also
with
give
you.
you